Hi.
Morning.
For the record, Rebecca Samaroff, Deputy Commissioner, Department of Taxes.
I'm Jill Remick. I'm the Director of Property Valuation and Review at the Department of Taxes.
And great to be here today. We were asked to come in to talk about a piece of our budget. It's also in the, or it's in the administration's budget, to apply 1.75 million from our current use special fund to a modernization program to digitize new pieces of our current use program. I'll just speak briefly on the budget surplus. This is something that we don't anticipate to continue growing. Right now, the fund has about a $2 million surplus, and that came about over the course of about a decade, where there was a small discrepancy between what the budget bill annually was directing to go from the property transfer tax into the special fund. And then that was a little different from our appropriation of what we could actually spend out of that current use special fund to administer the program. So this was flagged by our COO in the last 2 years, and we worked with JFO to resolve that. So now those two numbers are the same. So the fund won't be, getting any money that's not being appropriated to be spent down on administering current use. But the outcome of that is that there's about $2 million in this fund, and this year's budget proposes spending 1.75 million of that on an exciting modernization that Jill can speak to much better than I can.
Yeah, and I suppose it's not necessarily important for this committee. I think that money comes from like a property transfer tax return hold or something like that.
Yeah, a portion of the property transfer tax.
Right, so I think this committee is aware more than most, the current use program is a pretty substantial and complex property tax administration program that we operate. We do it in partnership with Forest Parks and Recreation. I know you folks have heard from them as well. And essentially, we have been carrying out the program almost entirely on paper, paper maps, paper applications, and because there are so many components to the application process, right? You have landowners, you have consulting foresters, you have Forest Parks and Recreation if there's any forestry land, and you have property changing hands, you have property coming in and out of the program. It's not really like it comes through, yep, looks good, moves on. There's a lot of management related to each particular parcel and the boundaries and buildings and things like that. So since and this was well before either of our time, but we've been using an Access database to maintain our property tax enrollment. And it's gotten to the point that like this past December, only one person could be in it at a time or it would crash, because the more data that's in it, the more it crashes. So we are really excited that we have sort of the 1-2 punch of, we have our new Grand List software system that we've pulled together. That's working fantastic. We actually just went live with current use yesterday, meaning that the piece of current use administration that is our staff communicating with the towns is now live. And they are rapidly working through applications using that, which is great. But all of the maps, all of the applications, all of the deeds, all of the withdrawals, all of that is still paper-based. So in other parts of the department, like personal income tax, for example, a return comes in, we have a scanner that scans it, does data verification, pulls that into BTPI, and the staff can process it. Current use, when we get paper applications, which is the majority of our applications still, we're hand entering those into our system because it is not a scannable form. We also are requiring folks to submit 3 paper maps, 1 map that we mail to Forest Parks and Recreation, 1 that our staff uses and literally uses a light table and lays the previous map underneath the new map to make sure that boundaries and things like that are still lining up. And then we mail a map to the towns. So we are really excited to not do that anymore. So we have, part of the reason that current use has not been part of the larger VTAX system, which is the system that the rest of the tax department uses, is when VTAX was first sort of contracted to do all the other tax types, property tax really doesn't fit neatly into the VTAX type. But what we're finding is that we keep sort of leveraging VTAX tools to help us with current use, because there are components of it related to like tracking correspondence, sending out letters to taxpayers without retyping them all separately for each taxpayer, the management of receiving the returns, having it scanned and data verified and moved into the system. There are a lot of pretty significant improvements that we could leverage by moving it into the same system as the rest of the tax department. There's also, as you folks know, there's income tax checks, good standing checks, things like that are in VTax that right now we're working on current use outside of VTax, and then we go into VTax to do those checks. So there's just exponential room for process improvement by moving into this system. And also we have two large, I think when we talked last week, or somehow I recall some testimony about how we have one large vault room of current use files, it's actually two, back to the late 70s and early 80s. And it was really challenging, especially during COVID, when we couldn't even have our staff work remotely because all the files are literally there in person. And like people, like the hazard was like paper cuts and wrist injuries because we're shoving paper files in and out of these file cabinets. So we would also really love to be able to scan those in. They would be part of the digital repository that all the other documents that the tax department maintains with all the same security lookup features that the rest of the department has. And that would allow us to be, to process things faster, to get our hands on these faster. Right now, staff literally have to put folks on hold and go into the file room and pull out the documents they need and flip through to find what they're looking for. It would also give us a lot easier access to share that with Forest Parks and Recreation. They've actually decided to stop sort of waiting for us with the maps, and they are now moving to all electronic maps. And so we're happily but sort of scrambling to catch up with that by this summer. And I think this is frankly what the current use special fund was designed to do, right? I think in the statutory language it says it's to sort of improve administration of the current use program. So it seems like exactly what this money was designed to do.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, and as Jill pointed out, like there's some elements of our very successful VTax system we've already been able to apply here, but when the subsystem is paper-based, you just can't see the same, leaps in service levels that the system has brought to our other tax types. And just kind of to help make that point, I included two other slides from our budget presentation. This is let's see, did I blast by one? Oh no, okay, we can start here. This is our performance slide on current use. You can see we have some metrics here like applications processed by April 15th. We've been hovering around 20%, and that's actually a drop from the prior year. Average days to process applications are also really, really long. And this, just want to make absolutely clear, this is nothing to do with the staff dedication and amount of effort that's being put into this. It's just really having hands tied by an old system. And, you'll hear our Commissioner Craig say many times over that why we're so successful at tax is because of people and computer systems. And this is just the one area of the department where the computer systems are not keeping up with the people. But just to compare this to another one of our programs, which I'm just having trouble navigating this.
While you're navigating, Representative Levitt has.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
What do you anticipate the average day to process applications will be if you get this system? How much will you be able to shorten it, is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, I don't want to jinx it, but I think it would be more like 30 to 60 days rather.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we are sort of in a constant state of being behind because listers are not always in the office either. So when we're mailing, we're working on something on a Tuesday and we put that map in the mail and the lister might be in on Wednesday. They don't have that map yet. So then we've just lost a whole week and we may not, it has really hindered that. And it means that we try to do everything and do everything well. So we want to make sure we do the income reviews. We want to make sure that we do have the right landowner's signatures, all these sort of components to that just, we would be able to work. I mean, even just with our VT Pi program that we just started yesterday, which we've been using for about a year, they've already uploaded 200 applications into that system in the day. And it's just, it is exponential versus typing in the application, then pulling it up here and then going into the Access database, file upload overnight. Then you've got to call the lister and check the grand list acreage because we don't have a way to do that. There's just all of these things that it's really indefensible how long it takes us to do this. But it is not for lack of people working really hard to do this. And yeah, we're gonna be in a lot better
It sounds
shape.
like you have a very complex system that you're currently working with, and this will just streamline everything.
Yeah, I mean, right now staff is working in 5 different software systems essentially.
Wow.
And you have email correspondence when you can't solve that with Access. You have the EQ's application system, which is going to be moving into VTAX, so that will all be in one place. The maps are going to be scanned or received electronically and attached in VTPI and scanned and saved in the document repository. So there will be naming conventions, so we can look them up instantly. I mean, we are several months behind consistently every year processing applications. I mean, the deadline is September 1. We're just starting to review applications now for this year. So we are hurting, and this would be, and also, you know, as I was saying earlier, there's already pieces that we kind of keep using VTAX to help us do, and there's also land use change tax, which I know we're coming back in tomorrow. That's in VTAX already. That's the piece that we can tell how long it takes for that piece to come back to us. The administration on our end of that is easy. It's the people component that is the place that delays that, but that's already in VTAX as well. So we keep kind of using components of VTAX to do this work. So it will be huge.
Representative Temple?
So outside of this curation of data that you're if this happens, you'll save a lot of time with what energies will that energy then be focused at now that you're not curating data this way? Meaning, like, you know, where does the extra time get spent now?
Right.
What have you been neglecting that will now get attention?
Yeah. I think the immediate answer is we will be able to be on time again. I mean, right now we are literally months behind.
Right.
And that has sort of a cascade effect, because then that causes more complaints, that causes more appeals, that causes more confusion about who owns what when. Tax bills have to get reprinted and revised. So if we could get back to processing things on time, that would be the short answer. That would be significant.
Yeah.
And then I think there's compliance pieces we would love to do that we can't do right now, right? We're really trying to like just get applications and enrollment updated as quickly as we can.
What does compliance pieces mean?
So Forest Parks and Recreation has their forest management plan for parcels that are in forestry. They actually go out and do site visits. There's pretty stringent rules for folks for forestry. And in agriculture, we have the annual agriculture certification that's sent out every year that folks are supposed to send back. And right now we have like no capacity to actually follow up on those, or like, we certainly don't do site visits. I don't know that we would ever do site visits because there's a lot we can actually find out from like Google Earth and things like that. But we could do much better follow through to make sure that, you know, the program is being administered with fidelity and that we are up to date on leases that might expire. Another piece that we're really behind on that we're hoping we can leverage some of these new tools is the map updates. So your map might change, your property might change over time. And we're also sort of a couple years behind on updating maps, which does impact people's enrollment if they change land from ag to forest or forest to ag. That would be another piece we would love to have that like fresh and always accurate and up to date. So that's as far as we've allowed ourselves to dream. If we could get caught up, that would be huge.
Cool.
Yeah, I think we'd have better customer service. I think we'd have better responsiveness, and our staff is fantastic. But it is really hard and discouraging when someone says, hey, I'm just checking on the status of my application and we haven't been able to get to it for months, or there's a map floating in the mail somewhere. So.
You might have more people enrolling if they find out it's a smoother process.
I don't know, maybe. We'd like to keep the staff that we have too, right? It's really frustrating. It's frustrating for folks to not have the tools that they know we have available.
Representative Lipsky.
Related to your challenges, our U.S. Postal Service performance in our community has resulted in 90% of my constituent cries for help have been on that. They're saying we may get mail once a week at best, maybe once every 10 days. That's a federal department, but it doesn't make your job. You may be late getting in the post office, but it may be, it's a crisis.
Yeah, that has
What
absolutely.
you're proposing
yeah.
is very helpful.
the due date of September 1st for applications for current use. And just related to that question, it makes me wonder whether it's like any tax form has to be postmarked by that day, and it's not like in your hands that day.
Right, so we've sort of informally have given ourselves like a 1 to 2 week grace period when things come in. I mean, there's a lot of processes in property tax that are mail and postmark, right? So like appeals, equalization study appeals, submitting documentation to us by a certain date. We've tried to be as lenient as we can with all of those because by the time we of course we post date, we stamp it when we receive it, but it might be dated 2 weeks ago, right? So we try to not, I mean, I think pre this crisis, we would maybe give folks a weekly time and now it's like it might be 2 weeks, and we aren't holding that against folks because the postal stuff is slow, but that is impacting our work, right? And the other piece is, you know, the majority of current use applications are still submitted by paper. So you compound that with the fact that then when we do get paper ones, we are hand entering them versus if we can get a really good online submittal, like we have, I mean, what do we have for personal income tax return? It's like a 90% e-file rate or something.
I was able to wrestle the slide into submission up here just as that comparison, which Jill's referring to. These are similar performance stats for our personal income tax program, which has been fully in our VTax program for a long time. You can see that, you know, our performance went from 90 to 95% of our timely filed refunds issued within 45 days. Refunds issued within 30 days is, you know, like we saw a big jump in the last calendar year. And that's because within the system, we have the opportunity to really like hone process improvements in our system, like change rules, you know, like automate checks across that would have been done manually in the past, and, you know, make those decisions based on data to see, you know, what checks and what verifications are really, you know, worth the squeeze. And tweak performance that way. So all tools we're looking forward to applying to this other world.
Yeah.
Other questions? So the special fund will still have a balance, and there are other uses for that we don't need to know about necessarily, or not this year because you're not appropriating.
Right, yeah, we won't have more appropriated this year.
Well,
Chair?
good morning. About 3 minutes ago, I was thinking I need to ask John if he has a question. Thanks for jumping in. Representative O'Brien.
I just wondered, at the town level, one of the allowed uses of our ARPA allotment is for digitizing records. And so I wondered if at the state level, with those federal ARPA dollars, is there also availability of funds to digitize some of the state records, and would this be an allowable use?
We did administer that grant program back in 2020. That was our team sort of pivoted and did this digitizing local land records using the ARPA money, and that was very successful. And a lot of towns were really reported back they were able to accomplish even more than they had hoped. So that was very successful. We don't currently have a grant program. I don't know if through the parcel program through BCGI or through the Secretary of State or VSARA, Vermont State Archive and Records Administration, they might have a current program. But that would be fantastic. I think John Adams from Vermont Center for Geographic Information, which sort of oversees this for the state, said they have like 87% compliance of digital parcel maps. But for land records, it might be higher or lower. I guess we'd have to have somebody from like VSARA in here, but yeah, we don't have a state grant for it.
So the ARPA, what you want to do digitizing, there's not ARPA money for that.
Correct.
Okay.
But we have money for it. We're just asking for permission to spend.
Yeah.
Okay, is that all set, John?
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks.
Does the proposed digitization have a name? I heard VPI, I heard, but that's an existing something.
Yeah, so there's a few major components. So VTPI is our grand list software. That's all property tax administration pieces. And so for example, the towns did their sales verification and the equalization study, which led to the CLA and all those fun things this past year. So it's been underway for a year. We're now in phase 2 where we're actually rolling out the current use component. So that will allow for much more timely interaction with the towns. It will allow us to attach maps that are scanned and send them to the towns instantly so we can call and talk through, or we can, none of this waiting overnight for a file upload. So that is significant. And then what we're proposing here is sort of 2 pieces. We'd like to spend some money scanning in our files and our records and setting up a way to intake maps that have been scanned or submitted electronically and review those electronically rather than using a light table. And then the other major component is basically taking all those last pieces. So there's EQs, which is the application piece. There's the email for the correspondence with the consulting foresters, the application and the database into the VTax system, which is the same system that all the rest of the tax department uses already. So current use will still be in VTax and then VTPI for that town interface, but that's 2 versus the 5, and everything will be electronically accessible by staff instantly.
So there isn't one sort of umbrella acronym that we need to, it's taking a couple of existing ones and then adding in the parts that you just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, we're sort of calling it the current use modernization project.
Okay.
All these pieces kind of fall under that.
Yeah.
And not even modernize, I guess, not even like future state, just like catch it up to like
Yeah.
late 90s. Would be great.
Or the rest of the
But
department.
yeah, current
heads.
use modernization is sort of the umbrella that these different pieces related to current use. And FPR is very excited about this and supportive of this and is doing their own modernization for their county foresters to be able to get to this stuff remotely and have everything available digitally too. So
You alluded, I think, to applicants, so current use ag enrollees can do that online now,
Mhm.
or they can use a form, piece of
Yes.
paper, and that will still be true.
correct.
And what's the breakdown right now, or roughly how many apply on paper
Over 65% apply on paper still.
still? Okay.
I think part of that is, I think that's one of the other reasons we'd like to move to VTax is the online application system is great, but because current use is sort of a legal document, because it's putting a contingent lien on the property, it requires signatures for everybody. So a lot of folks might complete it in the EQ system and then they'll end up printing it out and sending it to us because they'll sign it and print it and send it. So compared to the other tax types, we have a lot more people still submitting paper. It is helpful that they fill it out on EQs and send it because then it's at least typed and it's, legible and they've filled out the required pieces. But once we move into VTax, it'll come into the mailroom will scan them and it'll just show up in the software for our staff to work on. So they will definitely still be able, and people do that with personal income too. They can still hand fill those out. And there's staff that actually do what's called data verification and they'll actually look at it and be like, oh, yep, that's a Q or that's a G to improve the data that's pulled in.
That's a much quicker process than hand
Yeah.
entry. And this is aligning really well with other modernization stuff going on at the department this year. Funded elsewhere in our budget, we have a scanning project underway to replace our front end scanners. So just like improving the quality of those. The beginning of the paper process in the department. And then also our VTax system, we're building in a new document repository that wasn't implemented at the front end of this project years ago, but it'll just be like a great way for all of this scanned content from all of our tax types to be even more readily available in our system.
All right, well, thank you for coming in. Did you have a question?
I got a question for you.
Okay.
Just drafted up for this?
I don't think we do. I think that it's, so it's on that grid. And I think we just need, in fact, I don't think we need to do anything unless we have a concern or object to it.
They're not happy, but
I know.
Yeah, so.
I can't do anything with it.
Yeah.
But they were psyched that I could get in touch with you.
So we, yeah, I mean, I guess like the other requests that we've had this week and we'll go into next week, we'll have conversation and see whether anybody has any concerns. I'm not hearing any right now. But maybe once you leave, everyone will start. Hopefully not. No, sounds like a great use of funds. So.
I do
Great. Thank you.
being a person that has applied in the past. Currently working on adding more land into Carnegie. A speedier, easier process would be nice.
Yeah.
For you.
For you.
For as a
For people that are doing,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
enrolling.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you again tomorrow.
Yes.
Very good.
Does this live here?
It should
Behind the-
be here, yeah.
Yeah, don't let anyone.
We got a little carried away with our lockdown.
All right, well, we're all
Gosh.
done with this